The spiritual warrior has survived the destruction of the self. And there are very few spiritual warriors on the planet. And I'm going to talk about what it is to be a spiritual warrior and initiate level of my 7 levels. See those videos. And the understanding that this world is encompassed in a belief system passed through our family lineage for thousands and thousands of years of the fear of loss. Everything we do as an unawakened human is based and driven by the fear of loss in many, many different ways. And the spiritual warrior has suffered the greatest of all losses, which is the loss of self. And what do I mean when I say that? It means this, as I've said in previous videos, see my last few videos, this outer self that we create to navigate this world, this outer self, this outer consciousness has patterns from our family lineage that were imprinted on it when we came in, and the world has imprinted on us, and our brain and our senses and the way we respond to our reality has all created this outer conscious self. And I've said in other videos that this outer conscious self is what is holding us back from ascending into higher worlds of light, higher planetary civilizations, more advanced extraterrestrial civilizations. We can't get beyond this outer self we have created. And so therefore, when we pass, I've said this in many videos, when we die, we go to this trapped reality known as the astral purgatory worlds, where we continue to live this outer conscious self with our family and, with our identity that we created here. And so this is the entire planet we're speaking about, that there has to be a major transformation that occurs, and this is what this library is about, waking people up to way beyond these belief systems that they have, because all of these belief systems are based on a fear of loss. And so we have to overcome this, because the fear patterns that are created here are solely based on our outer conscious identity. And I have said in previous videos that there is an outer consciousness and an inner consciousness. And this deep inner consciousness, not your subconscious, which is still part of your outer conscious, but this deep inner consciousness is a cosmic consciousness that flows in continuously from the ancient universe, our parent universe that created this, you might say, sun universe, as in parent and child, or child universe might be a better word, but it is an ancient universe and we are a new universe. And that energy of consciousness is what created our universe. And that consciousness flows as an underlying substrate, an underlying fabric of this universe. And it's embedded in all the dark matter people talk about. It's actually, this consciousness is embedded in everything, but the physical worlds that are manifesting in this universe come from our divine blueprint, because consciousness is attached to the divine blueprint, and great cosmic beings create these blueprints that can create bodies in physical experience. And so bodies are abundant in the universe, and bodies are how consciousness, the inner consciousness, expresses and learns and grows through an outer consciousness that is manifested by some type of form, some type of body form. So these blueprints exist in the universe. And so we all have throughout the universe that is physical, that is in form of some kind, all have these blueprints where the inner consciousness is attached, and when these bodies are manifested, an outer consciousness goes into reality and is now learning about its reality. Because remember, inner consciousness, cosmic consciousness, the ancient universe of consciousness, the fundamental foundation, that consciousness is information, knowledge, and intelligence, and it is limitless. So we have this foundation, and the reason it is full of information and intelligence is because it is using form in some way or another, even forms we may not even understand, but it is using form, and it's using its consciousness in an outer way to experience a reality that it has created for itself. And those experiences are imprinted on the deeper consciousness. So when you pass, what is supposed to be happening, which we have completely lost, we have no understanding of these teachings I'm talking about. We have lost the understanding that it is our deeper consciousness that survives the body's transitions of death or non-existence. It's here and then it's gone in some way. Well, what survives when the outer consciousness in a body is either dies or however they are dissolved in some realities, they are dissolved, they're gone. What all of that experience in our outer consciousness, though, is, as I've said before in other videos, it's imprinted on the bigger, deeper consciousness. That is what is in your blueprint, and that is what is multidimensional. That is what can move on into higher realms of light, higher levels of intelligence, higher frequencies of intelligence. And so if we do not have the destruction of the self, I'm using this word like this, we cannot ascend out of here. And so because the layer of fear of loss is so heavily ingrained in us through our family lineage, I have given us the sacred fire to work with. You can meditate from now until the day you're gone, but if you can't clear out your family lineage patterns using the sacred fire, build protection using the sacred fire, I have videos on all of that, so that this sphere of protection keeps you in a space that's clear and clean, and you're not being bombarded by the astral purgatory world beings, which there are billions of them there, that are influencing you all the time, and your family lineage patterns and programs, and your family lineage who died and went over into these astral worlds are influenced. And then we have other beings in fourth density that influence. You have to use the sacred fire initially to clean all this out. And so that you can sit in a sphere, in a space that's clear. Because you can't, once you get clear of the noise, you have to then be able to go inwards and look at yourself. Look at the outer self and observe its patterns, and to really assess your patterns of fear of loss. Now, this is something that is taught on other planets, in other ET worlds that have a fear of loss pattern like we do. These mostly are third density worlds that I'm speaking of that do have space technology. They're using, more physical kinds of spaceships instead of the more interdimensional ones. And even in fourth density, there's some of this fear of loss. And so there are higher beings in those densities that are teaching their planets how to release this fear pattern, because they have set up schools. They have set up ways to cleanse themselves, like using the sacred fire. There are places where they go into temples, and in these temples there's like the sacred fire, and they can cleanse themselves in this fire, and they have great I'm using the word temples. It's not necessarily a religious thing. It's just a way for me to define, you could say, an educational institution, but institution has sort of a negative word to it. But it is a temple, a space where you can go clean out these waves of fear that the outer consciousness attaches to, and are properly educated on understanding the self as a deeper fundamental self and not the outer self. We don't have these kinds of schools. This library I have here is a way to leave something for future generations. I hope sometime in the future we will be able to establish some kind of school system, and I'm not even going to try to use the word school system, but some kind of institutional system where we can unlearn the things we have learned. And how we are doing it right now, friends, really is through these events in our life that have been specifically set up by our divine blueprint, and I have videos on the divine blueprint. But when we come into this reality, believe it or not, our divine blueprint, patterns are inserted. Remember, pattern keepers, I have videos on. Patterns are inserted so that part of our life path is destined, is predestined. But how we get through these destiny points that we are supposed to experience, how we get to them, how long it takes to get to them, how long it takes to get through them, how long it takes to master them, is our free will in the outer consciousness. But inner consciousness, coming through the divine blueprint, has set these patterns up for us. Why? Because they want these higher beings who created us. They're on our divine blueprint. They're at 8th and 9th level. They created me. Like I have like a godlike angelic ascended self which created me. She's wanting me to break out of this fear of loss pattern and ascend into higher worlds of light, into new higher civilizations. There are whole great civilizations in the universe waiting for us. So sometimes these patterns that have been put into our divine blueprint are traumatic. And in the real sense of the term, they aren't. But in our outer self identity, they are. Because these points in our life are designed to have our outer self get so shaken up that it has no place to latch on to in the outer consciousness world. It can't find anywhere of safety. It can't find anywhere to latch onto that it can believe in. Because when these dark nights of the soul happen, and I started having dark nights of the soul when I was a child. So I have experienced quite a number of these self-eliminating, self-destroying, self-evaluating traumatic events in my life. So I have now looked at these as great blessings. But you can have a dark night of the soul set up in your patterns for your life, and you can have an experience of that and not overcome it. So there could be multiple dark nights of the soul, but if you go through one and instead of allowing your outer self to dissolve, fall away, be destroyed in the ashes like the phoenix that rises from the ashes, many times you go through these dark nights, you succumb to them, and you become even more embedded in the fear of loss. Now you've lost some big chunk of your identity. It could be your job and who you thought you were in the world. It could be some relationship partner that you were so dependent on for your sense of identity, your sense of security and identity, when that's lost, you're floundering. And if you lose your identity with your partner who dies or leaves, and you lose your identity with your job, it goes away, this is now taking away parts of yourself, your outer self. So now you're floundering, going, okay, I don't have this identity. I'm no longer this person in my work world. I no longer have this identity as a husband, a wife, a mother, or whatever. And so now you have these identities have been taken from you. So now here's the test. Here's the growth line. What do? Do you seek to go inwards, to really try and understand who you are at a deep, deep level? Or do you reach out? Do you run to the church? Do you run to some new philosophy? I mean, do you run out there and try to latch on to something in the world to create a new identity? Okay, I don't have this identity anymore as my work. Okay, I'll go find this one. Or that person doesn't work. Let me go find this one. And so now you're still looking for your outer sense of self by latching on to the outer world to give you your identity. So what did you do with that dark night of the soul? You merely shifted from one box of who you were to another box of who you want to be in the outer world. And you missed the opportunity of going inner and finding who the real you is. And this is why initiate level of my 7 levels, see the video, is extremely rare on this planet. This planet is moving as a large planet, body of humans. We are trying to move solidly into aspirant level of my 7 levels. And when the entire planet gets into aspirant, we won't be having wars anymore. Because aspirant is the first level where we are civilization builders, where we want to trade and work with our neighbors in an honest and trustworthy way. We can trust our neighbor. If we can't trust another country because of what they're doing, that's because they haven't reached aspirant level. And so we have a lot of our world that's aspirant and below. Aspirant, that would be individual and tribal and mass and all this stuff. Amongst all of this that we're trying to move the planet into aspirant fully, we now have a layer on top of that of disciples, mostly 2 types, the kind of curious New Age disciple-y person I talk about, who's just reading and learning everywhere, but their focus is very short. They read a book, they go to a workshop, they can't hold on to the information. They may try the information for a few weeks or a few months. They can't keep a hold of any knowledge yet, but they're in a growing spurt. They've busted out of aspirant, so they're growing, and so they're unstable, but that's what happens with growth. Growth is chaos, and then you settle that. You have chaotic periods in your life, and then when you integrate all that chaos, it now becomes part of your foundation. And you move along, you build that foundation, you become secure in that foundation, you build that knowledge, and then boom, more chaos. So that's kind of how we grow here. But the more advanced disciple has been able to develop a more rational mind, a mind that can discipline itself and can work through teachings or knowledge or information, and can work with it and integrate it and stick with it to learn everything there is to learn about it, and then put it into its brick of foundation and move on. But now when we move into initiate level and we've built this big foundation, guess what? We've built this big foundation of who we are, and we feel pretty secure that we know everything. And let me tell you, the advanced disciple is now in this phase of intellectually feeling like they know a lot. Now, a real advanced disciple will admit to you they don't know everything. There's no way to know everything. But they begin to the rational mind, which has tamed those emotions, the rational mind now becomes God with an advanced disciple. They now prize and cherish the intellect. The intellect is king. I think, therefore I am. So I'm now the master of my reality. And so now you see these advanced disciples sort of being in a position of, I have mastered my reality. Now they know that unforeseen events can happen, but they feel comfortable in the knowledge of the outer world. They feel like they understand the outer world. And in some ways, they very much have understood the outer world, because an advanced disciple has spent a lot of time learning the outer world, learning about outer consciousness, and mastering it. Okay, now that's generally where they stand. That's generally where we stop. We don't really go past that on this planet very much. But there's another level beyond becoming an advanced disciple that has understood the outer world and can now sit in the institutions and say, I got this. So that's okay, but that's not enough to get you into higher civilizations of reality, higher information, higher extraterrestrial and planetary systems. It only means you've mastered Earth. You understand this world. But to get to higher worlds, that level has to be dissolved. All of it. And this is why the dark night of the soul at initiate level is so hard. It's not just about losing your job identity and losing a relationship over here, because people do that all the time, and then they go grab a new job and they develop that new job, and they go get a new boyfriend or girlfriend and they develop that, and they go get a new hobby and they go get a new focus, and disciple level, and then they're moving into this I know everything. Now when you sit, so listen to this, when you sit at the pinnacle of who you are on this planet, because you have had little losses along your life. We all do. You've lost, you've gained, you've lost, you've gained. These fears of losses that we go through, and you reach to a point where you have built such a solid base of knowledge of who your outer identity is. That is pretty solid. That's not going anywhere. That's passing into the astral worlds, because that knowledge of self is really embedded and ingrained, because it took the whole world to teach it who it was. So now you have this sense of self that the entire world, through many experiences, has ingrained into you a powerful, I know who I am. And now you become this big force of influence in the world with I don't know, teaching something or technology, or you sit in some sort of politics or wherever you are. You have this I have mastered, I understand the world. Even if you don't say I've mastered the world, most people don't say that, but in your mind you feel like you've figured it out. So in an initiate level, this strong foundation we have built has to be completely destroyed. Completely, brick by brick by brick, everything. And you could be in your 50s or 60s when this happens. Usually you're much older with this initiate level initiation, because you have built a lifetime of bricks of who you are in the outer world. And when I went through this huge self-destruction of my outer identity, I was already in my 50s. And so that tells you how old I am, friends. So I had to literally everything, every sense of self, every trauma I'd been through, everything I had mastered, everything I had overcome, all of it was completely crumbled in a period of time in my life where I went through the biggest dark night initiation ever. And this is what initiate level is. It is the total crumbling and destruction of a lifetime of beliefs that you have built. It's kind of like that tower in Tarot. It just all crumbles your entire life. Now, if you're 20, you haven't built much of a life. And even in your 30s, you haven't built much of a life. So a lot of those dark nights are just stepping stones to the big one. And it usually comes later in life. Because the reason it comes later in life is because you have ingrained, I mean, you have built these bricks so solid in your entire life, 50s or 60s or whenever it is, could be 40s, but somewhere in the 50s or 60s sometimes, you have just built this brick house, this castle, this fortress. And you may not be rich, and you may not even have, all the success you want, but it's your belief systems that you've built these bricks on. I mean, you could be a middle-class person, you could be lower-class person, but you've absorbed all the conspiracy theories. You've polarized between the left and the right, and the right is bad or the left is bad, or there's all these people out there to get you, and the world is evil, and and you build all these bricks. And these are bricks. So bricks and foundations are not necessarily building, a billion-dollar business. It is bricks of beliefs that you have seen the world, and you know what the world is. You've seen it, and you know how to survive it. And here it is. I've built it. Here's my game plan, how to survive the world. That has to crumble. And so when we move through the total destruction of the outer self, and that's an initiate level, we become a spiritual warrior on the other side of that when we have completely abandoned the outer world identification, and we have gone into that deeper foundation of the cosmic self, the true inner consciousness. And we are no longer identifying with the outer consciousness. We're no longer identifying with our brain patterns and our outer consciousness and the outer belief systems and what the world is showing us. We no longer identify with that. We go and find some new way to function that is from the inside out, that is from cosmic consciousness out. And it is like Jesus said, we're in the world, but not of the world. And this video is getting kind of long, so I can go on from here and now describe to you how that spiritual warrior, what it looks like when it rises from the ashes like the phoenix and becomes a spiritual warrior. And what I may do is discuss that in the next video. But for now, I'm trying to explain to you that the spiritual warrior, the true spiritual warrior, and remember I love to talk about my favorite movie, which was Kung Fu with Joaquin Kane, who was this wonderful spiritual warrior in my mind. But anyway, he was one of my heroes when I was growing up. And so we will talk about that some more in future videos, about this complete destruction of the self, because that takes more than one video to go through. And when you finally let go of the fear of loss, I will say this, the destruction of the outer self is letting go of the fear of loss. And you have to let go of the fear of loss in order to let go of your identity. And then when you are in this space of no identity, no self, you can find your true self, your cosmic self, your eternal self that is forever experiencing higher and higher realms of light, because that self is eternal. Okay, thank you, my friends. Be sure and subscribe and share these videos. I appreciate it.